Hi and welcome to my channel, Teresa's Crafty Cabana. Today I am working with some Distress Crayons. That is the new medium that I'm going to try on my gel plate. I've not tried these before. So to start out, I'm just gonna, these kind of work like wax. They're not as waxy as like a wax crayon, but they do have kind of like a gel type feature to them. So I thought maybe I could kind of just color on the gel plate and see what they look like. Now you may notice I'm using different colors, but they don't really look different. I was noticing that I couldn't distinguish which little marking was which color, especially once I pulled out the purple. I really couldn't tell that it was purple. So I decided to just stop there and put some white paint over the top and see if I could distinguish the colors if I were to pull this as a print. Because my gel plate is yellow, so sometimes it's hard for me to see colors. And so I thought I would try this and see what I could get as far as working with this medium on the jelly plate. And I just did a light coat. I didn't do too much. And my paper that I'm using is just 24-pound hammer mill copy paper. I am using my 5x7 gel plate. So the colors were a little more distinguishable, especially the purple and the orange, but the rest of them, not really. It wasn't anything fantastic. So I had some success with clear gesso in the past for some projects, so I thought I would try a coat of clear gesso on the gel plate first. I roll it out real thin, and then once it's a nice even coat, I do let it dry. So this is the tricky part, is coloring over the top of this gesso. If you press too hard, especially with these crayons the way that they're designed, you can kind of rub away or buff away the clear gesso. So I had to be careful not to press too hard, but I had to press hard enough that you could see the color, so that with the green there, you can see I started kind of buffing away the gesso coating. So this takes a little bit of practice, figuring out how hard to press, maybe going over it a couple of times, but I was able to get some really nice color. I definitely thought this would work better because I could see the color even before I put the white over the top. Again, I did use a thin coat of acrylic white paint, and I just used the other side of my paper. To dry this, I did let it dry for about 10 to 15 minutes. It wasn't super long, but long enough that I could get that crayon to transfer in the gesso layer. So this turned out a lot better. You can see the colors much more vibrant. It got me thinking that maybe I could try something else. You could see without the gesso, it was definitely a lot lighter. So I put down another layer of the gesso, and I did let this layer dry as well. And so I set this off to the side to dry, and in the meantime, I brought over just a magazine that I use as my scraps, like my scrap coloring, and I have a stencil that I'm just going to color over the top with these crayons. These are water reactive, so if you spray water on them, they'll kind of mix and blend together. So that's what I'm doing. I'm putting the different colors on, spraying down a little bit of mini mister water, and then I just put that over the dried gesso, and I'm using a piece of tissue paper just to press it in so I can kind of make sure I get good contact over that clear gesso. And that does seem to have worked. So it actually had enough color left on it that I could put some of the text on the bottom of this gel plate. So I put down another, I guess, a second round of this. I did not spray it with more water. I just used with whatever water was still left on the stencil. Next, I wanted to see if I could get some blending on the gel plate with my Distress crayons. I used the glass mat as kind of like a palette, and I was rubbing it off. I couldn't see the color very well, so I kind of switched it up and started coloring directly onto the stencil, and then using my blender to blend that onto the gel plate. And this one I could actually see the color showing up on the gel plate, so to me this was working a lot better. So I did some of my other colors the same way. I just used this stencil on the corner here just so that I could have a complete design. While this was drying, I set it off to the side again, and I pulled out another stencil that has kind of like these little X's or marks on it. So I used my silver, it's iron gate, and I sprayed it with some water, and I'm just applying this right over the top of my dried design. And I just try to get another impression over off to the side as well for a second generation. Then I let that dry before coming in with some alcohol ink colors. I picked the same colors of the Distress crayons that I was using. So I have a purple color, an orange. This is actually like a honeycomb yellow and a lime green. I'm kind of going in the same areas where those colors are on the plate. For me, I just wanted kind of like a tone on tone in those Distress crayon areas, and then I'm spritzing it with some 91% alcohol that I put into a mini mister and just trying to get those alcohol inks to move a little bit. And I do bring in my blower tool just to make sure I can blend these colors. I didn't want to use my brayer for this part because I didn't want to ruin the Distress crayon underneath. I don't know how well that dries really because I haven't worked with it before. So I figured maybe blowing out the alcohol ink colors would make it so it wouldn't ruin the cool design that I had gotten with the Distress crayons. The Distress crayons that I'm using are seasonal. They are the Halloween blend. I can't remember which year. It was a couple years back when I got these. I got mine from Joann's, but I think they do still sell them online at scrapbook.com and other online retailers. I am using an embossed piece of card stock that I made, and I'm kind of using it like a stamp just to get an extra impression on the alcohol ink. I let all those layers dry, and then I used my white again. And this time for my paper, I'm going to use the 110-pound Nina White cardstock. To clean my stencil, I decided to use a baby wipe, but I used it right over the top of the jelly print that I had made earlier because I wanted to see if I could blend what was left on the stencil onto my gel print. And it worked. I was able to get this nice texture or impression over my gel print. And then I set that aside, and now to pull this print up, I think it turned out so nice. You could see the little bit of ink blending from my Distress crayons. You could see the outline of the text where the Distress crayons were. And then of course you've got the alcohol inks, which are nice and vibrant. There is some tooth or texture to that clear gesso, so it isn't completely smooth, which I actually really like because as you can tell, this background definitely has Halloween vibes to it. So I am actually going to make a project out of this gel print. I loved it so much. I had an idea that I wanted to use some stamps, stencils, and die cuts that I'd gotten at Michael's this year from their Halloween section, and I hadn't had a chance to use them yet. So I pulled those out. These are the die cuts, the stamps, and the stencils that I had gotten from Michael's. I'm not going to use the stencil on this project, but I am going to use all the rest of these items, something from each of these. So we're starting with this, it looks like a gate or a door, something gothic almost. I just used some black cardstock and cut out a piece of this. I also had enough room on there to cut out one of the little bats. For my project, I decided I would do a tag, a pretty large tag, because I wanted it to fit this door or gate or whatever. So I'm just kind of moving it around on my gel print to see where I want to cut my gel print down. I also wanted to have more stability to this little gate or door, so I cut out a much thicker piece of cardstock. This is, I believe it's 140-pound cardstock, white, and I just cut, I left a little bit left over so that I have somewhere to make a hinge for this gate. What I really wanted to do was create a hinge where this gate will open from the tag and not be completely glued down. So I did have to kind of round the edges a little bit and trim it to match the size of the black cardstock piece. And then here I created a template for my tag. It's going to be a tall tag. I used the spiderweb stencil and the gold color to create a little bit of texture on this gate. I'm just putting down a little bit of the Distress Crayon and rubbing it out with my finger. Just trying to get a little bit more of an interesting design. And it makes it look a little more kind of rustic and vintagey, especially being that it's a creepy gate for a Halloween background. I wanted to create some Halloween elements using the stamps and die cuts, so I had this scrap piece of gel print that I had cleaned my plate with one day. It was just some holographic glitter, and I thought this would make a great background to my stamping. So I used some Versamark ink and used some gold embossing powder. And because this is like a painted background, because that holographic glitter is an acrylic base, I knew I couldn't use just plain ink. I could have either used the StazOn ink or it would have smeared if I used my VersaFine Onyx black ink. And that's why I decided to use the embossing powder instead. And plus it gives it a nice shine. Now I was stamping on my spider web and I totally dropped my spider web. Here's the replay onto my tag. But I thought I would just put some of my embossing powder down to see what it looks like. And I embossed it and I thought it looked really cool. So that was a happy accident, Bob Ross over here. And then I cut out my little ghost and my pumpkin, and I'm just using some alcohol markers to color in my little pumpkin here, using 3 different colors, 2 oranges and a yellow, and just kind of blending it. And then I used 2 different greens for the stem. Now this is a cute little moon, and it looks like just like a full moon with the little 2 pieces that you stick together. I used a yellow and kind of like a gray with yellow, and that gave it that shadow. And I just glued that together. And again, you could see how it's nice and holographic using that paper that I had made. This is the set that I got the full moon out of. You could see there. To turn this into a tag, I used this large angle side of my corner chomper. And I just chomped 2 of my sides to make it look like a tag. And then I used this cute little hole punch. This is from my QR Fun laminator, and it just has like little paper cutting supplies inside of it, and I used the hole punch. Now I used this tiny little hole punch for my little sign here. I wanted to hang it with some twine, and to know where to cut, I just marked 2 little dots and cut over them. And then for this gate, that was the kind of like the background piece. I colored it in with some of my alcohol markers, gray on the top and black on the bottom. and I just glued my gate down on top of it. This is to give it stability and also to turn it into this little piece that can kind of fold over my tag. Now I cut out these 3 trees. It has 3 different trees in 2 different sets, and I wanted them to have like a creepy forest look. I did color them in with my gray alcohol marker, and then I went over it with my black. With the black, I just kind of went roughly. I wanted to leave a little bit of the gray still showing in like the shadowy areas, so I didn't color it in perfectly. Then on my gel plate, I put more of that holographic glitter down because I really liked how the elements looked with that holographic glitter. And I wanted to make my trees glittery, so I placed the 3 trees down that were colored in and just used that tissue paper again just to press it in. And then once those were dry, I was able to remove them and they were nice and glittery. Perfect, because the glitter doesn't fall off this way and it's nice and secured. But it's also really beautiful. And then I just took some Aleene's tacky glue and glued the 3 trees down in the background here. I'm just layering them on top of each other. I want it to look like a creepy forest. I used some foam tape on the back of my moon and just set that off to the side. And then I used a little bit of the Aleene's tacky glue to apply the bat and the ghost. And then another bat inside under the gate. And then for the pumpkin, I glued that with the foam tape to the front of the gate. Now for my little sign that I created, I'm using these 3 colors of trendy twine. Actually for the sign, I'm going to use the purple one. These are sold, I think still sold by Trendy Twine. And if I can find a link to these, I will link it below. But I got these a really long time ago, so I'm not sure if they're still available. So I'm just tying my little Trendy Twine around my sign, being careful not to rip it. And then I'm going to wrap it through my gate just to have it kind of hanging. And then I'll tie the other side. I am double knotting them, both sides. Just trim away the excess. And then we have a cute little sign. And the gate closes. To hide the hinge, I just glued the 140-pound cardstock over the back side. This is going to give it stability, and it just makes it feel more like a sturdy card. Now the back of it does need something, so that first gel print that I created with the circles, I cut that one down and I glued that to the back side. And I thought that looked really nice to kind of bring those colors on the back side of this tag. Plus I could still write something because this side is pretty light. I just had to punch a hole through it again, and then this time I took 3 colors, all 3 of the colors of Trendy Twine, and put those on the top of my tag just to finish out the tag. And this is my completed tag. I did use some foam tape over the little sign so that it doesn't move around. You could leave it hanging, but I felt like it kept flipping and I wanted it to kind of stay in place. So I did use some foam tape there, and then you've got the gate that opens, and I think this just turned out so cute. I love how the colors look. That gate just looks great right over the top, and it opens and closes. You could put a little gift card in this or something if you're gifting it to someone. I love the creepy trees with the glitter, and of course my little elements that also have glitter. I think this turned out so fun. Let me know what you think. Did you enjoy this being turned into a project? And I know most of you wonder what I make with my jelly prints, so this is just one of the projects that I turned my jelly prints into. Have you ever used the Distress Crayons on your jelly plate? And Are you thinking of trying it out after seeing this video? I'm curious. My favorite way of using it in this video is when I was using it on the stencil and kind of spraying it with water and pressing it down onto the gel plate with the gesso on the gel plate. So that's how I would probably use it again in the future. As always, thank you for watching and being here, and I will see you in the next video. In the meantime, happy crafting, y'all.